From a specialized machine builder to a global tech company, Jendamark Automation continues to drive forward-thinking tech solutions, and now we're talking the fourth industrial revolution. Join us on our journey as we talk to industry experts and discover the incredible people behind the technology. We're making the fourth industrial revolution more human. He spoke at the 11th Investment Enterprise Development Commission, a United Nations conference. He has traveled the world from Europe, America, and Asia in search of the emerging tech space and has gained expertise about the fourth industrial revolution. He lectures an MBA class about the fourth industrial revolution and what it means for Africa. He's a sales and digital strategy director and one of 4 owners of Jendamark, a manufacturing conglomerate in South Africa. Join me for an insightful and educating conversation with a visionary and a tech expert, Yanesh Naidoo.
Well, Yanesh, thank you very much for sitting down with me. It is such an honor and a privilege for me to have the opportunity to sit down with you. I think for me personally, I'm ready to learn from you and learn from your experiences of what it takes to run and lead an enterprise that is this global and can solve global problems. We are currently in Port Elizabeth, and do you mind telling us what this machine is and what it does?
Yeah, evening, Goodwill. And thanks for those kind words. I really appreciate that. So we are sitting next to a catalytic converter assembly machine.
Yes.
This particular machine is designed for assembling large catalytic converters for commercial vehicle requirements.
Yes.
Yeah, as you can see with the robots and machines here, it is fully automated.
Yes.
And it's destined for Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been more than 15 years, 17 years to be exact, that you've been with Jendamark. Has the journey felt like that long a time, or has it just gone past?
Wow, 17 years. I think there's been ups and downs, and I think when you're down, it feels much longer, and when you're up, it feels really short. I think it's a mixture of both, to be honest. Really happy to have learned from our mistakes and my mistakes. 17 years well spent. That's how I feel.
Yes. So tell us, Yanesh, why does Jendamark want to start a podcast, and why is it happening only now?
Really interesting question. So I presented to an MBA class about 2 years ago, and I really got an interesting response and really good feedback from the class. And I was told that maybe I should share more about what we've done as an organization.
Yes.
And at that point, it sort of crossed my mind to start a podcast. But to be honest, I was afraid. I was like, who am I, or who are we to share share our experiences, and who can actually learn from what we do?
Yes.
And couple that with a whole bunch of fear about podcasting. You obviously hear about these amazing podcasters, Joe Rogan, etc., etc.
Yes.
And I was afraid until you called, and you basically pushed me out of my comfort zone and said, let's do this. And so here we are today, almost 2 years later since the thought first crossed my mind, and here we are. So I hope that we can share our experiences and help people understand, if anything, the people behind the tech.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't asked you this question yet, but why did you choose to do the podcast with me? You could have done it with anyone.
Yeah.
Why specifically me?
So as I mentioned earlier, obviously you pushed me into a corner, and I like people that challenge me, that don't always agree with me, and I appreciated that from you. That was the one thing. I think the second thing is, and I hate to admit this, but we're from different generations. I'm more than 20 years older than you. I hope it doesn't look like that, but I am more than 20 years older than you, and I feel I've got a lot to learn from you, and the generation coming. And I think it's important that I learn what the up and coming generation needs, requires, expects, so that I can adapt accordingly.
Yes.
That's the one important thing. And the other really important thing for me is we come from different cultural backgrounds, very different cultural backgrounds. And I really wanted this podcast to cater to many different minds. And I feel that you could bring a different dynamic to the conversation. And that's why I thought it was a good idea.
I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful. We are definitely going to be talking about how an African company has learned how to solve problems on a global scale, and how now they are going to be using technology to solve human problems. But I think it is very important for us to understand the story that is behind the people that we look up to. And in this case, we're going to get deep into the story of Yanesh Naidoo and just try to get a bit of insight on what makes up Yanesh Naidoo. So where in South Africa does the story of Yanesh begin?
Well, I was born in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Went to school in Zimbabwe, and I count myself fortunate to have gone to school in Zimbabwe at, I'd say, the optimal time, when Zimbabwe was the breadbasket of Africa. And I got to experience that. I got to experience a non-racial society, and I'm really fortunate for the lessons I learned as a school kid in Zim. Pretty much how it should be is how I went to school. I always had this passion for technical things, and so I always wanted to leave home to study somewhere, and the furthest place from home that my parents could afford was Cape Town. So I applied to UCT, fortunately managed to get in, and it was my journey to South Africa.
So South Africa wasn't always as what it is today, or the South Africa that we know today. And it is forever interesting for me to see that sometimes there are opportunities that are in front of you that you consider to be challenges, and other people get to see as opportunities. So talk to us about when you came in South Africa. I'm assuming that was long ago. I was probably a toddler at the time, or I was probably never.
You were maybe not born. In fact, you were not born.
It's certified. So were there opportunities at the time for people who were coming into the country, and has that changed for someone who might be willing to come into the country in 2021?
Yeah, I think it's a completely different time. And I came to South Africa as an 18-year-old, completely naive, wet behind the ears. And I honestly didn't view the world in that way. I wanted independence. That was an important thing for me. I wanted to be involved in technical things. And that was my focus. Obviously, when I got to campus, I did the typical student thing, failed a year, along with a couple of my friends. I won't mention their names now, but I failed a year in a couple of subjects. Probably did a couple of things that I shouldn't have done in Cape Town. But yeah, no, I didn't view it from that lens as an 18-year-old. Having graduated and started working, I then started to see opportunities that some of my friends didn't see. I guess it's because of my open-mindedness and the background I got as a school kid in Zim.
Wow. So now young Yanesh is growing up in Zim. Did you always know you were going to come to South Africa? And did you know you were going to study what you did study, which is mechatronics?
No, I didn't always think that I would come to South Africa. I always knew I was going to be involved in technical things. And I mean, guidance from my dad and my mum pushed me through my dyslexia in school, encouraged me, made me believe that I wasn't stupid, even though I was like not doing so well in school. And encouraged me to do the things that I enjoyed, and that was technical things. And my sister knows that better than anybody else because I continuously broke her toys and made other things out of the components from those toys. So yeah, I didn't always know I was going to come to South Africa. Cape Town was always a destination that I wanted to consider, but being involved in technology and the technical side of things was clear from as far back as I can remember.
And then would you say that that is what informed your decision? The fact that you were put in a position where your parents gave you trust, they trusted you, and they loved you in the way that you needed to be loved, to sort of build the confidence. Would you say that that is what stemmed into you choosing the career path that you chose?
I don't know if it was a direct. I don't know if it influenced the career path, but the way my parents brought me up, I'm eternally grateful for, because it gave me that confidence in myself, even though I wasn't necessarily succeeding in the conventional manner. They always believed in me, and it wasn't a case of just saying it; it was feeling it. And I think that's such an important gift that they gave me to back myself.
Yes. So there's a story that I know of you, which is that you were selling curry leaves, and eggs. Talk to us about that story. It's quite interesting to me.
Yeah, somehow I think when I was 10 or 12 years old, I didn't know what what an entrepreneur was, but I was always in the business of trying to make my own money. And so what I did was I convinced my old man to buy me 5 chickens, and he helped me build a chicken run at the
And
back
this is back in Zim.
back in Zim. And he helped me build a chicken run, and I still remember on a piece of paper writing out how much money he spent on buying the chickens, how much money I was spending on a weekly basis for food for the chickens, and obviously the chickens were laying eggs, and I'd collect them every day, and I'd take them to school and sell them to the parents that were dropping off the kids at school, and I used to sell it to family and friends. And once that bug bit, I thought, I can sell other things. And the lowest cost was curry leaves. We plant a tree, it grows, zero cost, and I can take these curry leaves, and people wanted to buy them.
Yes.
Obviously, within the Indian community in Zim, it was a popular thing. I even sold granadillas. I mean, I started planting granadillas to sell them because there was demand for it. And I was 10, 12 years old. So there was always this wanting to be independent and to make money.
So sales have never intimidated you in any way. I mean, from the age of 10, I can imagine when I was 10, I was not thinking anything of that nature.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're 10 years old, I didn't know what I was doing. I was having fun. It wasn't a necessity that I needed to sell eggs to survive. It was nothing like that. It was fun for me. And my parents encouraged it. They pushed me to do it because I was enjoying myself. So it wasn't like born out of necessity. I grew up very fortunately, lucky for me, but it was fun. It was a thing I wanted to do, and I was encouraged to do it.
Such an incredible story, from selling curry leaves to selling big robots on a global scale. It has been quite a journey. I just wanted to ask you, looking at what you've done in your life, it is known that leaders of great enterprises are very assertive. And when do you get to know the fine line between being assertive and just borderline ego?
Yeah, interesting question. I think that is a difficult question to answer, because I think I do have an ego, and that always plays. It always comes up, sometimes more often than not, depending on the situation. But what I have learned is that as I've gotten older, and I hate saying this, that I'm actually getting older, I have come to realize that I'm now much more confident in myself, and I've become much more accepting of who I am. And I realize that my ego comes out when I'm feeling insecure about a particular topic, and that's a reaction mechanism. And it's a fear of being intimidated or something. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to understand that, recognize that, and as far as I can, control that. But sometimes it comes out, and yeah, as I get older, I think I get better at it. It's some people call it wisdom,
Yes.
but I don't like being called wise, because it just seems that I'm old.
It is difficult to navigate, I can imagine, because your life story has proved to be very profitable. And when you see those kinds of results, it is very difficult to sort of dim the ego down when it has helped you produce all that you have produced. So it's really interesting for me to just hear you say what you just said.
I'll just add one thing. I think people, again, what I've learned as I've gotten older is people fail to be candid with each other and tell each other the truth. We try to sugarcoat things and say what other people want to hear and not the truth. And I think that's a huge lesson in my life. And sometimes people mix up the truth with arrogance. So somebody telling you the truth, and you may not like the truth, may make you feel like the person is arrogant. But as you get older, you start to accept the truth and you start to tell the truth more and more. And I think it's one of the cultures we try to build in our companies is being truthful and being candid with each other, because that's how we can then deal with the actual issue and not people's egos.
Wow. Wow. I mean, often the egos get to clash. No, that's a very powerful answer, Yanesh.
So, Goodwill,
Yes, sir.
can I ask you some questions?
Absolutely, absolutely, Yanesh.
So tell me, why were you pushing so hard to start the podcast with me?
I think that you don't always get the opportunity. I mean, the way that I met you is for me literally a miracle. Not to sound religious because I'm not religious, but the first time that I met you, I just there was that thing in my head that I just need to learn from him, and what better way to learn from someone than to have a conversation with you. So there are many reasons that pushed me to push hard to get you, but one of them was just plain learning. I think that if I can learn from you, I'll be able to become what I actually want to become.
I also heard through the grapevine that you dropped out of varsity.
Oh yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So when I went I was at Witwatersrand studying a BCom degree, and for me personally, when I was there, I think I was there for the wrong reason, and because of that, I just didn't have the motivation, and the wrong reason being that I never wanted to go there. I just thought somehow, and I believed in the idea that I had the entrepreneurship spirit inside of me. And I always make a joke about this that I'm registered in 5 businesses in CIPC, and none of them are active. But when I was in high school, I always knew that I wanted to pursue something that was outside of what I was conditioned to believe was the tradition. So that is what made me drop out of varsity. Yes.
Okay. So you're trying to bring out your inner Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates for that matter.
Hopefully we can bring that and more.
I hope so too.
Yes. It was a very tough time. I won't lie about that. It was a tough time, but it's proving to come along. And on that note, I have to also mention that it's such a cliche for us human beings to look at the success story and celebrate it, and not take the opportunity to see that there isn't a success story without the tough times. So in 2008, there was a global economic crash. How did Jendamark navigate around those challenging times?
Yeah, I think challenging is an understatement. 2008, 2009, 2010 were definitely, I'd call them our dark days. And what was interesting is that the financial crisis really highlighted the small cracks in our businesses, the small problems we had in our businesses, and turned those cracks into craters that we pretty much fell into. So some key underlying principles that I felt we were missing back then was we were really good at making machines, but we made them really average because we were at that stage we were doing almost any kind of machine. We were making ointment filling machines, we were making fingerprint scanning machines, we were making catalytic converter machines, and we were stretching ourselves to try and become experts in all of these different things. And to be completely honest, we were failing at all of them. We were just average. And during that financial crisis, what really happened to us was our customers that we thought we were doing a good job with highlighted to us by ordering from other people that we were doing a pretty bad job. And so we were in a position where we had no income coming in, no big projects coming in. We had, I think at that stage, we were about 70 or 80 people.
And when was this exactly? 2008?
2008, 9, yeah. And we had bills to pay, no money coming in. And so I remember the moments distinctly sitting in Quinton's office, and we asked ourselves the tough question: do we do this or not? And the consensus around the room was, we want to do this. And we then said, okay, why have we been failing? And it was a tough discussion amongst ourselves. And we said we've been failing because we've not been true to the tech. We've not strived to be the best at something.
I mean, it must have been tough, to be honest with yourselves like that, to that level. I mean, that truth was a big element towards progress.
Absolutely. And we took a decision then to fight for our business, to believe in ourselves, and really be true to the technology and focus on making the machines the best. And we set ourselves a target. We said, when we can start exporting these machines into Europe, and more specifically Germany, then we know our product is good. And so we set ourselves a target of trying to design the machines in such a way that we could export them at the right level of quality. And we wanted to have 50% of our income exported and 50% of our income local. And we thought that would strike a balance. And we then took the decision to narrow down our product line to catalytic converter assembly machines and powertrain assembly lines. And that allowed our design team, the rest of the organization, to narrow down, focus in on our niche. And that was the plan. That was in late 2008, 2009. The years that followed were even tougher.
Wow.
Because now we narrowed down our customer base from ointment filling machines to fingerprint scanning machines to these very niche products that we didn't have a good product to offer yet. And so the years following were even tougher because now we had limited income. We were spending money on trying to make the machines as best as what we could, spending money we didn't really have.
Yes.
And lucky for us, in 2012, we got a big break from one of our customers that came to us and said, can you design this machine? We had no idea how to design that machine, and it was a shrinking machine. And we said, yes, we'll do it.
Wow.
And what we actually said was, we will design it at our cost. And if you like it, buy it. If you don't like it, walk away.
Sure.
And
that's a big risk.
It was a huge risk. But that was the way we could convince a European customer to believe in these young guys from Port Elizabeth to design a machine for them.
Wow.
And that was the risk we took. And through blood, sweat, and tears, and a whole lot of luck. Don't let anybody kid you that it's all strategic. It's a lot of luck and timing. We managed to pull it off, and that was the start of our export business. And now we export 90 to 95% of our machines all around the world, and I'm proud to say even in Germany.
Wow. So there's the saying, Yanesh, that says luck is preparation that meets opportunity. So would you then say that during those tough times, that's exactly what happened, since you mentioned luck, that it was the combination of both of those, that you guys were prepared, or were getting in the stages to get prepared, and then the opportunity just came, and then it became luck?
Yes, I would certainly agree with that, but I would also add the willingness to take the luck.
Wow.
Because being prepared is important. The luck presenting itself is important, but being willing to take it and recognizing that it's actually luck and an opportunity is, I think, an important point as well.
Wow. Talk us through what Jendamark actually is. I mean, we're talking about what happened in Jendamark in 2008, but what is Jendamark, and what does Jendamark actually do?
So at our core, we design and build machines that assemble automotive components. As you can see from here, and if you just check out on our website and YouTube channel, you see a number of these machines. And the machines are one thing, but as we've developed our business over the last 10 years, what really stands out for me are the people behind the machine. as amazing as what some of these machines are, the people that have created them are even more amazing. And that's what I hope this podcast can bring out, is that in order for there to be great tech and great machines, no matter what it is, there has to be great people behind that.
Like,
And so I hope that this podcast can strike that balance between, deep diving into tech, but also deep diving into the personalities within Jendamark and obviously outside of Jendamark that are behind the tech.
wow. So now in 2012, things are starting to get better. You're starting to get the people that are supporting you and are holding hands with you as customers, and the businesses are starting to do well. And then there's on the underlying, there's the emerging industry 4.0, but at the time it was not called that. So Yanesh then goes all over the world to try and find out how Jendamark can respond to the call. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. I just want to, before I answer that question, I just want to add one thing. So you spoke about in 2012 the customers starting to form the relationships with customers that built a sustainable business. But as important as that were our suppliers, and I genuinely call them partners, because during the dark days there were many suppliers that blacklisted us, that really kicked us in the teeth when we were down. And there were a number of suppliers that really helped us through those times. And those are the partners that we still support today. When they have tough times, there's no question about the support that we have for them. And so it was both sides, partners, customers, and suppliers. That's a very important point that I don't want to leave out of the equation.
Yeah.
To your point about Industry 4.0, of the fourth industrial revolution, and there are many terms for it. About 5 or 6 years ago, one of our customers asked us, what is our Industry 4.0 strategy? Long before the term fourth industrial revolution came out. And we were like, what is that?
Just coming out of something.
Yeah.
Something starting to work. Yeah.
We were getting a formula that was working. And obviously doing some research, speaking to some of our customers, there was this whole new revolution that was apparently happening about digitisation and virtual reality and artificial intelligence and all of these things. And what I was filled with was fear that we've now started to build a good business, and now all of a sudden we are irrelevant or becoming irrelevant. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was tasked by my partners to go and find out what is this Industry 4.0, and we obviously must come up with a strategy to tackle this Industry 4.0. And through the travels north, south, east, west, trying to speak to people and understand what is this fourth industrial revolution or Industry 4.0, it was pretty evident that actually nobody knew what it was, and nor did we. And my recommendation to my partners was to just try something.
Yes. Just start with something.
Exactly. So let's just start with something. So we bought some VR headsets. We started doing some programming of digital work instructions that we had done previously for some of our other lines, and we just started. And as we started, we then started to understand actually what we don't know, and gave us some direction on what we should know. And to be completely honest, we've got a very clear strategy with what we want to do, and we've been developing now for the last couple of years, and we've got products out in the market that are really tackling some of these problems. But I think we're just starting.
Wow.
I really think we're just starting.
So when you started, you said it's either it was fortunate or it was unfortunate when you went all over the world to learn about Industry 4.0. What does it take personally to make that kind of a sacrifice? I can imagine leaving your family behind, and the many times that you were there. What does it take on a personal level?
Fortunately, I have a very understanding wife, and I think she understands what it takes. There's no question about that, and she supports my travel. She understands that comes with the job, At that time, I didn't have a daughter. I now have a daughter, and I say fortunately and unfortunately, because of COVID, I haven't traveled at all. So I've fortunately been able to spend a lot of time with my daughter and watched her grow and etc. But it's going to get tough when I have to start traveling again. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also not looking forward to it from a family perspective. Um, so maybe you can ask me the question in 6 months' time. It might be a different answer.
Yes.
So Goodwill, another question from my side.
Yes.
From your perspective, and me appreciating that you haven't been involved in the whole fourth industrial revolution, what is your perception of 4IR?
So my perception of 4IR before I met you was almost nothing. And I got the opportunity to listen to your MBA lecture. And immediately when I heard that lecture, it really transformed how I see 4IR. I mean, yesterday I took an Uber at 4 a.m. in the morning to go to the airport, and it clicked in my head that I'm in a car with a stranger that I don't know at 4 in the morning, going to a destination that he didn't know about 15 minutes ago. And I just saw the power of the personalized experience, and all of that is literally stemming from what I got exposed to once I got in interaction with you. So I mean, I understand now what it's doing, the shift that it's bringing, in the transition, and I think that we take for granted what these industry revolutions do. You look at the third industrial revolution, and now we're moving into the fourth industrial revolution. Um, Everything we call a career or a reality that we experience as a reality is defined by these sort of things. So yeah, that is my take on it thus far.
And what is your, maybe it's an unfair question, but where do you think this fear of job loss comes from?
That's a tough one. Fear from who?
From the general public, because there's this perception that the fourth industrial revolution is going to result in job loss.
I think being uninformed is a dangerous game, Yanesh. I think because people don't understand what it is, then the first natural response of something you don't know is to defend.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's stemming from. They just don't understand, and because of that, that's where the fear and the insecurity and the discomfort around the topic of fourth industrial revolution comes from.
Yeah.
So it's just being uninformed.
And how do you think we could use this podcast to solve the problem of uninformed?
So one of the first things I think is people getting exposure, because that's what exposure does, is that it opens up different avenues within yourself. And so the podcast, I mean, coming from me who didn't know for IR as well, and what it is, what being informed by you has done for me, it immediately took out the fear or the insecurity. So what the podcast can do is that it can do that for the people that we are appealing to. It can inform them, it can teach them, and then immediately that eradicates any fear of some sort.
Yeah. And I hope it sparks a conversation around our thoughts, at least my thoughts on what the fourth industrial revolution is, and I hope that people have counter thoughts and we can spark a conversation and a debate. And I think through that kind of debate, we find new definitions and new ways forward. I really hope that people interact with us and come on the journey, so to speak.
And so when you come from overseas and you start to learn about the fourth industrial revolution, I saw in your lecture you were talking about how we can't copy and paste how the European countries are responding to this transition. Talk to us about that, and how 4IR is affecting or will affect Africa within the African context.
Yeah, so one of my observations and real opportunities that Jendamark has afforded me is to really design and manufacture technology that answers a challenge in Europe, or not necessarily Europe, but developed countries. And as you can see from the background, there is a whole bunch of automation involved in that.
Yes.
And the reason why there's a whole lot of automation is because it's about taking people off the production line. Because by taking people off a production line, you make the cost, you bring the cost of the product down, because the cost of labor in developed countries is high. And it's a basic explanation as to why the cost of labor is higher in developed countries, is because there's less and less people. So populations are getting smaller. So when you have a low supply of human capital, the demand goes up, and when demand goes up, the cost goes up. And so the biggest driver for cost of product and cost of manufacturing from a developed country perspective is labor, and the increasing cost of labor, because supply is low.
So I think right there would be the first problem that we make as Africans, to think that, oh, they are cutting down the jobs, so now we are jobless, and that's one of the things that would talk to that insecurity and that fear that we were talking about. And then in your lecture, you then mentioned how in Africa it's a different context altogether.
Yeah.
Tell us about how that looks like.
Yeah, so in developed countries, they have to cut jobs, else they become they're no longer competitive, because the product goes up, the cost of the product goes up, so they're not competitive. So the only ways to remain competitive is to cut jobs. Whereas if you look at the African scenario, we have a bulging population, 1.3 billion people on the continent, and it will soon be 2.2 billion.
Wow.
And the majority of that population sits under 20 years old. You just went past it. Good for you. And if my fear is that if we copy and paste the fourth industrial revolution as prescribed by the Western world to solve the cost of manufacture into Africa, we'll have a huge social problem, because that's not our problem. Our problem is not the rising cost of labor.
Yes.
It's it's the opposite problem. We have a cost of labor that keeps going down. In fact, it should be going up. But that's not all doom and gloom in my eyes. What I really believe in is, having experienced exporting these technologies, that there's certainly an opportunity to rework these technologies in different formats that can create opportunities for the youth in Africa, and really unlock those efficiencies that can again reduce the cost of the product, so we can become competitive. That at the end of the day, it's about being competitive, making a product as cost effective as possible. And in my opinion, automation in Africa doesn't necessarily make sense. In some cases it does, obviously, but in many cases it doesn't. Whereas digitization, as with the Uber example that you talk about, presents a way to build a business in a more efficient manner, a more personalized manner, that's effective and creates jobs. Uber's created 13,000 jobs in South Africa.
Wow.
I think a lot of people don't know
that's
that.
really incredible. Yeah. 13,000 jobs
in the last 6 or 7 years.
Wow. Yeah, that is really a game changer, and it shows you the power of the fourth industrial revolution. On the same note, I think that we have the opportunity now to ask you about these big companies: Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. How do they use the fourth industrial revolution to model businesses that prove to be as profitable as those guys?
Yeah, so interesting question. So if anybody's interested, it's not my theories. You can just Google this concept called Gaffonomics. Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon economics. And there's a whole host of information out there on the internet about it. And I learned a lot from Googling. And one of the key things that stood out for me is that all of those businesses are actually network businesses. They are all about establishing connections between people and things, and collecting data from those things or people, and building products and services on top of that, and selling them back. Google Maps is a good example. None of us pay a cent for Google Maps, but yet we use the service. Google doesn't charge us for that service. It's a useful service.
Yes.
But in return, we give them our data, our location, our speed, and they can then sell those services onto Uber as an example. And Uber used Google Maps as part of their ecosystem to solve a particular taxi problem. And it's really about putting value on those digital connections and nodes in the ecosystem that these companies value much more than physical assets, for example. And the kind of obvious example is Facebook purchasing WhatsApp for $19 billion.
Sure.
WhatsApp was a loss-making business. So if you asked an accountant to value WhatsApp as a business, it wouldn't have a positive value.
Wow.
Their turnover was $100 million. They were making a loss, but Facebook bought them for $19 billion.
Sure.
So the typical valuation of a business versus what they were sold for doesn't add up in the conventional sense. But what WhatsApp had was 1.5 billion connections.
Sure.
So Facebook valued the connections far more than the financial value of that business. And as we learn and grow and develop our products, those are some of the principles that we want to build into our product. It's really about valuing the connection between people, things, and building your product on top of that, as opposed to trying to own the asset itself.
So tell me, Yanesh, is it so for someone who is in South Africa? Is it not difficult to be able to start a business within the business model of these guys, because they are in developed countries, and in our country it is not the same. So how do we then navigate the difference between a developed country and a developing country to model a business in this day and age?
Yeah. So I think it's about picking a particular problem that you want to solve and trying to orchestrate all of these different technologies in a particular solution to solve that particular problem. Maybe to better explain, I'll talk you through how Uber has solved that by network orchestrating different technologies. So Google Maps, I spoke about, they didn't create the app stores. They didn't create cloud computing. They were initially used Amazon Web Services. They've since moved from Amazon Web Services as a cloud computing platform. They didn't create that.
Wow.
They didn't create the concept of a rating system that's a fundamental driver of Uber. So, when you're happy with the driver, you give them 5 stars. The higher the driver's rating, the more trips they get and the more money they make, which encourages them to, drive safer and be on time, etc. So all of those nodes that Uber put together to solve that particular problem were not developed by Uber. They were these Amazons and Googles and Apples, etc., that created those technologies, but Uber put them together. And I think as Africans, we should leverage those existing technologies and put them together to solve whatever challenge that we want. And there are many, many examples of South African businesses and African businesses that have done that.
Yes, that is really incredible, Yanesh. When I was listening to your lecture, one of the things that I thought was really incredible is when you were talking about the difference between 3IR and 4IR. But you were talking specifically about education. So because of mass production, which was literally what drove the third industrial revolution, then what did that mean for education? Can you talk us through what that did to education and how the education we know as education today could have been different?
Yeah. So I'm not an education expert. I'll give you my comments and thoughts as a complete sort of outsider and a non-expert. But if you take a step back and have a look at how education is delivered to people, it's mass produced and it hasn't changed for 100 years. So 100 years ago, there was a classroom. You went to a particular grade based on your age, and you were taught a specific syllabus. And if you passed that test, you went to the next grade. If you failed, you stayed behind. And that was created to mass produce and deliver education at scale, because obviously populations are massive. And so we need to find a way to educate everyone as quick as possible.
Yes.
And that was necessary at that point in time. It was the only solution we had, and it made a lot of sense. That's how I went to school, and it worked for me. But using these new technologies, these digitization technologies, we can evolve education to be much more adaptive and much more individualized because it's digital. So, as you know, we bought a startup education company, which is now called Odin Education.
Yes.
And what these guys have done is really amazing. I mean, they put together this tablet and they've written some firmware on this tablet that basically allows a Vodacom or an MTN SIM to be inserted into it. It locks the device down from a safety perspective, so children can't access the terrible things that are available on the internet. So it's a completely secure device. And they've built in a learning management platform, Zoom classrooms within the device. And what separates and what made the system really different, and why we bought into the business was they have this system that they call web platforms.
Yes.
And what they've been able to do is source close to 200 free educational platforms that are on the device. And so what happens is when they distribute the devices to kids, and obviously it's targeting the 10 million underprivileged learners we have in South Africa, and that's a massive number.
Very huge.
That every time I say that, yeah, it makes me sad. But anyway, we have we've created sorry, as I was saying, they've built this application called Web Platforms, and with these 200 platforms on there, and they distribute it to children. And from the tests that the teachers give them, from the interaction they have with their textbooks that are obviously on the device, as well as the interaction with the web platforms, the system is able to understand the child's strengths, the child's weaknesses, and their interests. And what happens is, using some learning algorithms, the device is now able to adapt to the particular child's strengths and weaknesses, and give suggestions to the teacher on what web platforms the child would benefit from. One of the really interesting case studies is the amount of we had about 600 kids in the Free State use the device for a while, and there was a huge amount of interest in chess, which was surprising. Like, a number of kids were wanting to play chess, and so what we did was we built a chess club online, and so now these kids are playing chess with each other from different schools, and now the chess club has grown across to multiple provinces, and they're all playing chess with each other. And it's been really amazing to see how we're able to scale this education platform, individualize it to every single child at 5,000 Rand on a 2-year contract, which includes the device, includes 2 gigs of data per month, and 5,000 Rand or 2,500 Rand a year is really not a lot of money. And it's because we've been able to network orchestrate these technologies together that we're able to deliver this world-class education to underprivileged children for 2,500 Rand a year.
I mean, the customer who asked you in 2012, how does Jendamark, or how will Jendamark present a strategy, the 4IR strategy? I mean, this is a comeback properly. I've had the privilege and the opportunity to actually meet the kids and see their eyes light up when they use the device. It is really, really incredible. And I think that the work that you guys are doing is a big response to the emergence of 4IR. Yanesh, thank you very much for sitting down with me. I think this is really, really incredible. And I just have to mention that moving forward, we will then both host the show, and then we'll have an external guest come into the show, and then we'll have a chance to chat with them and explore more tech, and that will just put us in a position where we can all learn and become better. Thank you very much for coming.
Goodwill, thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.